Can you explain this part to me though? Because Kamala touted that right-wing immigration bill in Atlanta last week too. Like, why is it that that seems to be the point that both parties can agree on? I mean, the stuff with the deportation, it's a bit crazy.
A bit crazy. I mean, it's very crazy. And Donald Trump is talking about Eisenhower. He's talking about a word I can't say because it's a slur in the aftermath of the Bracero program, where we deported 1.3 million Mexicans from this country, including Mexican Americans, as a matter of fact, not just people from not people whose nation of origin is Mexico. We did that. We did that during World War I. We did that in the aftermath of World War II. And Donald Trump's touting that as a popular policy. And it's got like 60% approval right now. And a big part of the reason is because there's no counter messaging against that from the Democratic front. They have completely been captured by the right-wing framing on the matter. And obviously, it's very racist, very fascist. I mean, it's just like straight Nazi Germany stuff. No one is thinking about like what 20 million, let's say there's 20 million migrants in this country that are undocumented. How exactly are you going to do the mass deportation? You're going to start going into brown neighborhoods with BORTAC, with the American Gestapo, Special Weapons and Tactics for the Customs and Border Patrol, in what the ACLU calls Constitution-free zones, and you're going to start doing door knocking operations and cast a dragnet over brown communities, and then put them in CCOT style, like in El Salvador, like mass detention centers, mass deportation facilities. You're going to put them in front of one judge, 200 at a time, because there's 20 million people. That's a lot of people, right? You have to make this process as expedient as possible. So now you're putting 200 people at a time in front of a judge that is declaring them to be illegal. Then you have to put them in concentration camps. I mean, that's just straight Nazi Germany stuff. And I don't think anybody's talking about it on those terms, which I find to be abhorrent. I find it to be morally repugnant.
But to have agreement with like neither one of the parties is being reasonable here. It's just everyone's getting dragged over to a place that, like, I mean, what is that? How is it that we've arrived there? Like that is not anyone's idea of America in principle.
I know. And Americans are actually not of one mind on this. Immigration historically is one issue where Americans are like consistently both very sympathetic to migrants on and also very Hitlerian in the same breath. Like these are, if you look at focus groups on immigration, you'll be shocked. Like a person will unironically say, I want mass deportations of all migrants living on U.S. soil. And in the next breath, we'll say something along the lines of, yeah, we should do amnesty actually for everyone that's been here. And it's like, how can you have these two opinions? That's because the Democratic Party is too scared. They refuse to actually have any sort of counter messaging on this front. And they just capitulate the right-wing framing every single time. They did this with the crime panic too. It's completely born out of hysteria. It's straight Hitlerian on the Republican side. And what's happening in America right now is not dissimilar to the rise of Hitler and Nazi Germany, in the sense that like liberals also capitulated to in an effort not to adequately put up a strong fight and align with the communists and align with the trade unionists, align with the socialists against the rise of Nazis and the rise of fascism in Germany. They said, no, this guy is working within the confines of German politics. It's fine. And we all know what happened afterwards. It's called the ratchet effect. The Democrats regularly play the role of almost controlled opposition on a lot of issues, this one being one of them. It's the same with the bipartisan consensus on American foreign policy. This is basically, which I would consider to be fascist in general, but no one really cares about that. And this is fascism inward, like bringing fascism back domestically, having concentration camps for people that don't look like you, that people whose immigration status could be quickly and expediently dealt with and turned into documented U.S. citizens who are already participating in the American economy in incredibly meaningful ways. People who statistically are less likely to do crimes than natural-born U.S. citizens. A fact that Democrats should be saying every single day of the week. They should be putting that front and center. It's just completely made up. This hysteria about migrant crime is completely made up. Crime is down. Crime is down in America across the board. Okay. Crime is down. It readjusted back to like the lowest levels that it was at pre-pandemic. Right. and it's only going down further and further. So the idea that like we have tens of millions of migrants crossing the border and they're doing crimes is so silly. It's like, okay, migrant detentions are up, crime is down. So what's going on? Is it that they're just like doing less crime? Is that what it is? Well, turns out that is actually the case. All available empirical data on the matter shows undocumented immigrants are responsible for less crime per capita than natural-born U.S. citizens are. I'll give you another fact. If you were to listen to the Republicans constantly talk about, sorry, my dog is actually sitting. Hey, Kaya, sit. Baby, sit.
That's a good dog. We haven't heard
Sorry.
that dog once yet. What kind of dog are we talking about here?
Dog.
Yeah.
Good dog.
I'll show you.
I'll
show you her in a. Yeah, I'll show you her in a second. So the one thing that what was I talking about?
You were saying you were going to give us one good
Dogs,
fact.
I think,
you
yeah.
have one good fact that we need.
Mention Hitler a lot too.
Oh, I did mention Hitler a lot because that's unfortunately that's where we're going right now, and we're bouldering towards that. So, like I said, Democrats should constantly be talking about the fact that there is no readily available empirical data to suggest that immigrants are doing more crime. As a matter of fact, the only available empirical data shows the exact opposite of that reality. So it's a pure Republican hysteria, Republican panic, and it's really racist panic. One other thing I will tell you is this. Donald Trump talks about immigrants are responsible for hundreds of thousands of deaths every year. That's what he says. He says that at his rallies. He says that as the RNC. I've never heard from a Democrat be like, yo, hold on. What are we talking about here? That seems like a big old deal. I've never heard a Democrat go, that seems insane to say. Let's take a look at the data. Well, I did look at the data. Customs and Border Patrol data shows. Do you want to know how many murders undocumented migrants committed this past fiscal year?
Yes, I would, because I did see what John Oliver did on what you're saying there, that migrant crime is a total fiction. There is nothing to support it. It's just a made-up phrase.
Yeah, it's completely made up. You want to know? I'll tell you what it is. I looked at the data. 23. So that means, and we've definitely heard 23 horrific, gruesome things that an undocumented citizen has done in this country. So that means that every single instance of a murder committed by an undocumented migrant was heavily publicized in this country in an effort to make you think like they're doing crimes every day. This doesn't mean that like undocumented migrants are responsible for zero crimes. Of course not. They're human beings. Some human beings are going to do good things. Some human beings are going to do bad things. We're all a victim of our own circumstance. But you have to look at like, if this is how to deal with crime, you have to look at the entire group of people and see if they're responsible for an overwhelming share of the crime. And it turns out they're responsible for less crime. It's actually insane that we have this conversation. Donald Trump tries to link the undocumented, the undocumented murder rate. He tries to claim that it's 100,000 because he tries to claim that it's fentanyl, right? It's actually the fentanyl that they're bringing over the border. Another total fabrication, completely made up. 90% of drugs that are coming across the border are apprehended. This is the Department of Homeland Security's own data. This is not, woke Marxist Hasan making this up. This is the Department of Homeland Security, okay? So according to the DHS data, and this was the same under Donald Trump, it's the same under Joe Biden, it'll be the same under Kamala Harris or whoever becomes president. The Department of Homeland Security's own data shows 90% of the drugs apprehended at the border are not actually like border crossers, right? It's not a law-abiding abuela from Guatemala who walked all the way to America or tried to cross the Rio Grande River, like carrying bags of fentanyl over the border. That would be insane. That's an unsustainable business. That's an unsustainable operation. You know who's actually trafficking the drugs? White American citizens that are crossing over the border after getting their cars chopped up by the cartel. Of course, 90% of the drugs are apprehended at regular points of entry, according to the Department of Homeland Security's data, and more than 90% of those apprehended are American citizens because they're the ones who are less likely to get stopped.